I'd like to introduce myself formally. As Sarah mentioned, I'm Gloria Tom. I'm the director for the Navajo Nation's Department of Fish and Wildlife, a position that I have held since 1998. By proper way of introducing myself, I see I have a few Native relatives in the room, so I'll take care of that first. Torich Eatney Nishle, Touch Eatney, Bushish Cheen. I'm originally from the St. Michael's, Arizona. That's where I make my living. My husband Jimmy is a retired law enforcement person. He used to work for the Bureau of Indian Affairs Law Enforcement and retired from the Navajo Nation as a chief ranger for the nation. So, and we have one son, Tyler. He's 21 years old and still trying to find himself, and I'm being very patient with him. Some of you can relate to that, but hopefully he will find himself soon. Anyway, I've worked in, is this echo bothering you, or is that okay? Is it?
It is a little high, very bad.
I know it's bothering me. Okay, I won't say anything until he fixes it. So I've worked, nope. There's no, testing, 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 testing. Testing, testing, is that better? Okay. I've worked for the Navajo Nation, as I mentioned, as the director since 1998. Prior to that, I held various positions with my department as a wildlife biologist and also as a wildlife manager. I also was employed with the USDA for a while, and I worked for the San Carlos Apache tribe and the Navajo Nation Environmental Protection Agency. I got my bachelor's degree in wildlife management from the University of Arizona in Tucson in 1985, and have been working in and around the field since that time. I want to thank Sarah for inviting me to be here today, and it's been a real rewarding experience for me meeting a lot of young people, young enthusiastic people. I've been in this business now going on 25 years and looking at retiring soon and hopefully turning over the reins to some of my younger colleagues, so I'm looking forward to that. So I want to thank Sarah for inviting me, and I'm really happy to be here today to talk about one of my favorite subjects, my department. I have a very lucrative job in terms of working with a fine bunch of professionals, both tribal members and non-tribal members. We have a very committed staff, and I think you're going to see that in my presentation. Do I need to do something with this, or? Okay, for those of you that aren't familiar with the Navajo Nation, we are about 18 million acres in size. We're comparable to the state of West Virginia in terms of acreage. We're located in the states of Arizona, Utah, and New Mexico. And we also have some satellite communities over in New Mexico. The story behind that is that many years ago our people were taken from our original lands, and we were forced to go across to a place called Fort Sumner. And that's where they gathered us up, and I don't know what they were going to do with us then, but somewhere in there they decided that to allow our people to go back home. So when we made the trek back home to our original lands, there's a few people that kind of stayed behind in certain areas. So that's in New Mexico. This branch here is Navajo Nation property. It's not Navajo Nation per se. It's a ranch that we purchased back in the 1980s, the Big Boquillas Ranch. So we're the landowner there. We have vast resources there, very beautiful homeland. For those of you Dene that are in the audience, you know, we're very blessed to have these resources. We have resources that bring people to our lands just to see these beautiful places. And for me, it's a real honor to be a part of the management of these resources for our people. The mission of my department is basically to conserve, protect, and restore the Navajo Nation's fish and wildlife resources, and this includes plants. And we're primarily doing this for the spiritual, cultural, and material benefit of our people. Most recently, we acquired 2 programs in addition to our fish and wildlife management programs. One is the Navajo Nation Zoo, and I'll talk about that briefly in my presentation. And then also we have what's called an animal control program, and I'll talk about that as well. This is how we are organized within our government. The Navajo Nation is a 3-branch government. We have a legislative branch, we have a judicial branch, and then we have an executive branch. The executive branch consists of our president of the Navajo Nation, which is Russell Begay, and his staff, and he has a cabinet of about 12 division directors, one of which is a natural resource division. And that individual is Bitta Becker. She's our executive director for the Navajo Nation Division of Natural Resources. And then under the Division of Natural Resources, we have about 11 departments, one of which is the Fish and Wildlife Department, which I oversee. I have 5 programs within the Fish and Wildlife Department. I have a management section. Basically, this program is responsible for managing our fisheries programs, our big game management. This is where our habitat enhancement program is, and also our wildlife damage control program is situated in that section. We also have a wildlife law enforcement program. For those of you that are not familiar with tribal governments are independent sovereign nations. Therefore, we are not subject to state law. So the tribes have their own state laws and regulations, and it's no different for our fish and wildlife program. We have our own fish and wildlife laws and regulations. So our wildlife law enforcement program is responsible for enforcing those tribal laws and regulations. We also have what we call an Operation Game Thief program. This is where somebody who witnesses a wildlife crime can report it to us and remain anonymous. And if there's a conviction that results from that report, they can be rewarded. We also have a hunter education program, and we also have an eagle feather distribution program for our traditional people that use the feathers for traditional purposes. Our Navajo Nation Zoo is the only tribally operated zoo in the country, and our zoo houses only native wildlife to our lands. I think the only exception to that was a Gila monster that we had that's not native to the Navajo Nation. That is primarily our education and outreach branch of our department. They also are in the process of building what we call an eagle aviary. This is a facility to hold golden eagles and bald eagles. Those eagles are basically non-releasable, injured, and therefore we hold them in this facility, we raise them in the facility, and we collect the feathers that naturally molt, and those feathers are distributed to our tribal members for ceremonial purposes. So we're in the process of building that facility. We also use the zoo to host community events, and it's a hugely popular place to gather for youth. We have several major events that we host there. One is what we call a zoo brew. It's a Halloween party. Then we have a zoo fest in May. That's to celebrate the anniversary of the zoo, and it's a hugely popular facility. We usually average about 5,000 to 6,000 people at those events in one day. That's pretty remarkable. We also have a natural heritage program. This is our endangered species management program. Basically, they're responsible for monitoring our rare, sensitive plant and animals that occur on the reservation. We are also responsible for compliance, ensuring compliance. Whenever a project is being proposed, project sponsors have to come through our office to get clearances to proceed with that project. And we do maintain a herbarium. That herbarium is located here on the NAU campus. And then, of course, we have our animal control program. We acquired that program in the 1980s primarily because there was no one else that would take it. And so we took that program. It's basically enforcing our animal control ordinances and addressing our stray dog and cat problem that we have on the reservation. Real quickly, our funding comes from several sources. We receive over $2 million in funds from our tribal funding. These are funds that are generated from non-renewable natural resources, coal mining, oil and gas, etc. The Navajo Nation, that's primarily what runs our government. And so we receive approximately $2.5 million of that to run our department. We also have what we call an enterprise fund. All of the revenues that we generate from our hunting and fishing programs come back to our department, and we utilize those revenues to operate our big game management programs and our fisheries programs. We also receive federal funds through the Bureau of Indian Affairs. When the Navajo Nation was originally established, it established the reservation and created what they call trust lands. These are lands that are held in trust by the federal government for the Navajo people to use. And the Bureau of Indian Affairs was named as the trustee. And so they have a responsibility to the Navajo Nation in that trustee capacity. So through that responsibility, they provide funding for our fish and wildlife program and our natural heritage program. Normally, in any given year, that funding amount is usually somewhere around $500,000. Last year and this year was a good year. They provided us with a lot of extra funding, which works out real well for us. And then, of course, we have our Bureau of Reclamation contracts. We participate in the recovery of endangered fishes in the San Juan River. We're part of the recovery plan, and so Bureau of Reclamation provides funding for that. Just real quickly again, our general fund allocation, these are tribal monies. They're distributed between Fish and Wildlife Management, Animal Control, and our zoo. Our contract is distributed between our Fish and Wildlife and law enforcement programs and our Natural Heritage Program, which is our Endangered Species Management Program. Our revenues that we generate, Navajo Nation has been building a real strong reputation for big game hunting in the country. So in 2015, we generated close to $1 million in revenues just from hunting and fishing alone. That's where we make our money, basically, to run our big game programs. We also have recreational fishing opportunities that we offer. And again, these are both to Navajos as well as non-tribal members. Just a few projects that I'd like to mention. Again, with our zoo, we acquired this program in 2004. We got it from the Parks and Recreation Department. At that time, the political atmosphere was the government wanted to close the facility and set all the animals free. Well, we knew that wasn't a very good thing to do because most of the animals at the zoo are basically non-releasable. They're there for some reason. They can't survive in the wild. So we took it over. Through some really excellent managers that we've had in the past, they've developed a real high-class facility. And again, it's a facility that we use to do our education and outreach with the communities, because our communities are really tied to this facility, especially the young people. They like to come to see the animals, and again, these animals are animals that are native to our lands. So it's an excellent opportunity to provide education and outreach on those animals. Each of them has a story, why they were there, when they came in. Some of it is pretty remarkable. We also have 2 Mexican wolves that we house there for exhibiting purposes. We also just recently acquired a black-footed ferret. She came to us a few months ago through the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So it's an excellent opportunity for our people to see animals that they would otherwise not see at all. And it's also, again, an excellent opportunity for us to tell what some of the limiting factors or what some of the barriers are to these animals thriving on our lands. So we take that very seriously. One of our biggest challenges when we received the zoo was we just didn't want to have animals in cages. We did a lot of research. We did a lot of training in what we call, I guess, getting the animals to think for themselves. Instead of just being there and having people come and look at you. You know, we had to do a lot of innovative things to keep their brains going and keep them physically active. For example, with the bears, you know, putting out popsicles, hiding popsicles in their cages was one thing, and they had to go and find it, and then they sit there and they munch on it, and you know, it's just getting their minds to be functioning. Other things is putting balls in the cages and having the animals move them around, or stuffing treats in boxes and having them search for them. So it's just an opportunity for the animal to be thinking and using their senses rather than just being in a cage. We are subject to USDA inspections, so we do get inspected by the U.S. Department of Agriculture for animal health and animal captivity regulations. And again, we are in the process of building an eagle aviary. It's basically going to be a long rectangular building where we're going to house up to 30 eagles. And all of the eagles that will be there will be non-releasable eagles. And again, we're going to be collecting the feathers and distributing those to our tribal members for ceremonial purposes. We currently do that right now. We have four birds, four golden eagles housed at the zoo now. We do collect their feathers, and we recently, over the past several years, received authorization from U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to collect those feathers and distribute them to our tribal members. And again, it's strictly for traditional ceremonial purposes. We do have a strict policy regarding that. They have to meet certain requirements, and they're limited in what they can receive. With natives, a lot of times they'll request like whole tail feathers. You know, those types of requests, we can't accommodate those types of requests. We only distribute individual feathers. So if with those types of requests, the large requests, we usually refer them to the Eagle Repository that's operated by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Our Natural Heritage Program, again, is responsible for monitoring our rare, sensitive plant and animal species. And to my knowledge, we are the only tribe in the country that has its own endangered species list, in addition to the federal endangered species list. Our list is basically localized species that are threatened or endangered on our lands. Now, we have a lot of species that occur on our list that do not occur on the federal list, primarily because of our land management practices on the Navajo Nation. The Natural Heritage Program is responsible for inventorying and also managing the data related to those species. And we also, again, are responsible for ensuring that projects are in compliance with tribal and federal wildlife laws. So we go through a project review process with each project. And unfortunately, we don't catch everything. There's stuff that pops up that we say, oh, you know, we didn't know about that. You know, we didn't know about that project. So we're not set up to completely catch everything that happens on the reservation. We've also done some ferruginous hawk monitoring. We monitored nesting territories and productivity for several years. We've documented up to 50 known territories for ferruginous hawks. As a result of our monitoring efforts, we've developed guidelines for raptor safety and power lines. Avoidance measures are in place to protect ferruginous hawks as well as eagles. Our review process for projects is constantly being refined. we used to get blamed a lot for being the barrier to progress on the Navajo Nation, just because of our review process. But we're getting better. We have a huge database. We've integrated a lot of the GIS and GIS technology into our system. But basically, again, our goal is to protect our resources when it comes to project development on the reservation. And we ensure that federal and tribal laws are not violated. And then, of course, our wildlife resources are protected in that process. I was involved probably in the late 90s in the development of policy. The chapters, the Navajo Nation is broken into local governments, and those are called chapters. There's 110 of them throughout the reservation. And over the years, the chapters have been receiving more and more authority for land management in their chapters. And so my department felt it was very important for us to be involved in that process with the chapters. So we embarked on a project to identify areas that we felt were highly significant to wildlife. And it went further to where we were able to develop highly sensitive areas, moderately sensitive areas, and low sensitive areas. And again, this was intended to be a planning tool for the local communities. One of the things that chapter governments didn't realize is that they had unique wildlife resources and unique wildlife habitat occurring in their area. And so this was our way of trying to communicate that to them. And so this planning tool basically identifies what areas are highly sensitive. And if they wanted to do a project in that highly sensitive area, under this policy, there would be a process that they would have to go through and follow in order to get their project cleared. And again, we developed this process, this policy, to try to direct development to those areas that would have a least impact on wildlife. In other words, if you were to go into, say, like a low sensitive area, you know, the requirements and the criteria in that area are less restrictive than if you were to go into the highly sensitive areas. So our goal was trying to funnel development into those low impact areas. We also identified what we call community development zones. These are areas that are around high community areas, such as the loop area is a good example. It's already developed, got a lot of human activity happening there. There's no need to really require a whole lot of restrictions or a whole lot of guidelines in those areas for development, because it's already pretty much developed. We also have what we call biological preserves, and that's the green areas. In some of those chapters, the people there, they recognize certain areas that have a high environmental significance to the people. And so through this policy, they're able to designate those as biological preserves and basically protect those areas from development. We've had several communities do that, which was surprising to me. I didn't know, like some of the areas that were proposed, we didn't know about. So these are localized preserve areas. And then, of course, we have our recreational areas. Wheatfields Lake is one of them. The Bull Canyon Recreation Area is another. We try to limit development in those areas only to those activities that further the purpose of that recreation area. So it's pretty unique policy, and again, it's intended for our local people to basically get online and click on their area, and what pops up is basically a map showing these different color-coded areas, and that gives them the idea. A lot of them come back and say, "Oh, I didn't know we had this. I didn't know we had these red areas in our boundaries." So it's an excellent planning tool that we're really promoting at the local level. Just for our clearances, my department does not have a yes or no authority on projects. In other words, I can't say, no, I can't approve this. The best that I could do is recommend to our legislative oversight. I can say, yes, this project is good, it's ready to be approved, or no, it's lacking this. I recommend you don't approve it. Or in some cases, it might be, I don't have enough information to tell you yay or nay. So, but that's the process. We were labeled as the bottleneck for a long time. But according to my information, we've cleared approximately 98% of our projects that come through. The 2% are eventually cleared after negotiating with the project sponsor. There might be things that they can do to mitigate the impacts, but it's not like we put our foot down and say, no, you can't do it. Our wildlife and fisheries program is a pretty extensive program. We do a lot of habitat enhancement on the reservation. It's very localized, very small projects. We do things like aspen thinning, fencing projects, water development, installing wildlife guzzlers. We do some woodlands treatment in certain areas critical to big game. And we have the Wheatfields Lake Recreation Area located right along the Arizona-New Mexico line. It's a hugely popular recreational fishing area. We've done a lot of work over the past 10 years in modernizing the facilities there. For Indian tribes, we're not privy to a lot of the funding that the states have for recreational development. And so we have to make do with what we have, and we try to do that through our fishing permit sales. And so we're installing sanitary restroom facilities. We do a lot of trash maintenance at the lakes. More recently, we installed a fishing pier that provides access for handicapped individuals. We're looking at doing a lot of upgrades to the campgrounds and the day use areas at Wheatfields. Our mule deer management program has been a success story. Back in the 1950s, we didn't have mule deer on the reservation. And we started transplanting deer to our reservation in coordination with Arizona Game and Fish. My dad was a forest protection officer with BIA, and he remembers back in the 1960s, he helped in those transplants, bringing the deer in. We built our herds up in the 1960s. We started having some limited hunting, And to this day, it's grown. We now offer trophy hunting for people that want to pay the price. We also auction mule deer permits at the conventions, and but we're facing some issues with our deer herds, and we're in the process of trying to evaluate what's happening. Or some of our populations are not where they're supposed to be. A lot of our winter range, our densities are changing, and so we're going to be restructuring a lot of our harvest recommendations to account for that. And I'm not sure what's happening. There's a need for a lot of research there. Climate change is a strong possibility. Another possibility is our mountain lion populations are increasing. So we're looking at all avenues. Basically, we need to do some readjustments in our harvest recommendations for mule deer. We also have a huge problem with encroachment. We have a lot of people moving into critical areas they haven't been before. Elk management, we're developing a really good reputation as providing quality elk hunts. We didn't have any elk until the 1980s, and the populations are rapidly expanding, and we don't mind because the revenues are coming in. But we're doing, again, we do monitor our elk populations. A lot of the big game treatments that we do on the habitat are benefiting both elk and deer, as well as livestock. We are slowly developing our reputation as providing desert bighorn hunting opportunities. We discovered a small native population along the San Juan River back in the 1970s, and I believe that population was about 30 animals. And today we have over 300. And the original herd exceeded its carrying capacity because of our management efforts that we were doing to improve the habitat along the river. And so we had to start doing transplants downriver. So we've established 3 more small populations down the river towards Lake Powell. And then we've also sent some of our sheep over to Arizona Game and Fish. They've taken some sheep from us as well. We've been studying this population. We found out what their habitat components are. We found out their primary areas that they use along the river and the seasons that they use those. We've been doing telemetry on that population for since 1997. And as a result of all of this information, we've been doing a lot of habitat enhancement along the river for the sheep. We've been donating permits to desert bighorn sheep auctions. Most recently, we sold a permit for $45,000. All of the revenues that we generate off of these auction permits go back into funding that study. And that's how we pay for that monitoring. Just real quickly, our clients that we serve, our hunting community, Again, we have a huge demand for our hunt permits, so we're always in the draw business. Too many people want to hunt, so it's becoming increasingly difficult to get drawn for hunts. Me being the director, I haven't been drawn now for 2 years, so which is strange. We also have different classes of permits that we offer. Of course, under the Navajo permit class, we have different categories. We offer a senior citizen permit, which is a 50% discount for our Navajo seniors. We also offer a veteran discount for our Navajo members that served in the armed forces and were honorably discharged. We also recently added a mobility impaired permit class for our Navajo people. And then an interesting one is our spouse permit. Not many tribes do this, but if we have a non-Navajo that's legally married to a Navajo, they are afforded the hunting privileges of a Navajo at a Navajo cost, which is a huge, huge benefit. For example, our deer permits usually run about $1,500 for a non-Navajo. For a Navajo, they're $45. So I don't know if that's an incentive for a lot of people to come and find Navajo, free single Navajo people. I get teased about that a lot from people. You know, they say, oh, I want to marry a Navajo just to get that benefit. And I'm like, that's not right. Anyway, and then of course we have our non-Navajo clientele. Very small portion, but again, our prices are pretty high for that segment. A little about our animal control program. Our animal control officers are certified nationally. They go through a series of training and certification. We have a huge problem with dogs and cats. Thousands of bite cases per year. Thousands of cases of livestock damage by dogs. And then we just have a problem of unwanted pets. We've been working in partnership with our veterinary program to initiate spay and neuter clinics. We've also been working on bringing in outside organizations for animal adoption programs. And some of those have worked, but we still have, it's a learning process, and it's something that we need to reach the young people. We need to get them to be responsible pet owners. Vaccinate their pets, take care of them, spay and neuter their pets. That's what we're targeting, is the schools. We're out at the schools, the officers are out at the schools, they're constantly promoting the spay and neuter clinics. We do have a requirement for licenses on the reservation. About 3 years ago, we did away with that fee. We just told people you need to license your pet. It's free, but the big issue is just getting people to accept the responsibility of having a pet. That's the barrier that we're facing right now. We have shelters that we operate and maintain. We've been working very hard on improving our appearance, our animal control appearance. We're trying to develop more professional-looking facilities. Back in the day, these were operated by the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and they weren't very professional. They weren't well maintained. And but again, funding is always a challenge for us, and it will continue to be a challenge, but we're still trying to find innovative ways to make things happen. Our law enforcement program is 6 strong, covering 18 million acres. Yeah, we're good though. We've made some major cases with mule deer cases that went national. We've indicted a lot of people doing terrible things on our lands. We've done a lot of work on Operation Game Thief. We receive a lot of information on that. We do hunter education classes. Anybody that wants to hunt on our lands has to have a hunter education certification. To this day, we have not had a hunting accident. I attribute that to our requirement. And of course, they help us with gathering biological data during the hunt seasons. Again, our OGT program is very popular, and we do have cases that come out of the OGT program that are, people are convicted, people are required to pay fines. And again, our hunter education, this is a MOU that we went into formal agreement with Arizona Game and Fish, and they basically gave us our hunter education program. So we do our own classes. I'm a certified hunter education instructor, and we certify anyone who takes our hunter ed. Oh, and if you get caught doing illegal violation, a wildlife violation, then you're required to take the hunter education class again. So in order for you to get off our blacklist. So that's one of the things that we require. Our Eagle Feather Distribution Program is very popular. It was initiated and approved by our former president. We did that several years ago. We have a native fish management program on the San Juan River. We raise razorback suckers on our tribal farm. And we raise them, and then we harvest them and stock them into the San Juan River as part of the recovery implementation plan. We get BOR funding to do that. We're monitoring our Mesa Verde cactus. This particular species has been highly controversial on the reservation, particularly in the Shiprock area. So we were able to work out an agreement with the Shiprock community to where we were conserving some of the cactus and we're allowing development in other areas. We're trying to steer development away from these sensitive areas, and the Shiprock community has been really supportive of that. A neat project, personal favorite of mine, is our annual youth hunt. We mentor young Navajos between the ages of 12 and 16 years old. They come from families that are not complete. Some of them come from single parent homes. Some of them come from families where mom and dad have left and just basically left them with the grandparents. Some of them are orphaned. They want to learn to hunt. They want to learn to be outdoors, but they don't have anyone to teach them. And so my department, my employees, we mentor these individuals. And we take 20 each year, and we run them through a training program, our hunter education program, and then we run them through a firearm safety program. And once they complete that, they're afforded a 3-day mule deer hunt on our reservation. And this project is nationally known. They've been featured on the Outdoor Channel every year. Our latest sponsor is Michael Waddell. He's from the Bone Collector Show on the Outdoor Channel. He provides everything for these kids. All of the equipment that you see there, all of their camouflage clothing, their backpacks, their water bottles, their binoculars, he buys that for all 20 kids every year. It's a hugely popular project. We also monitor our golden eagle populations. We've been doing that now for over 15 years. We know where their territories are. We know where their active nests are. We know what the success rates, their fledging success rates. We know their prey base. We know a whole lot about our eagles. Real quickly, our challenges. I'm running out of time. We have an issue with our forest management. We need a more active forest management program. Our last timber harvest was 15 years ago. We're seeing a lot of overgrowth on our forest lands. We also have a moratorium on development within our commercial forests. Obviously, we're not seeing that being enforced because we have a lot of human encroachment problems happening. The ID team concept in natural resource management is lacking, but we're starting to move back towards that now. With our new administration that just came in, our president and our executive director, they're really focused on getting a lot of on-the-ground projects happening and through using that concept of interdisciplinary management. So I'm really excited about that. We received a $154 million settlement from the federal government for mismanagement of natural resources. We're still fighting about how to use that money. It's a highly political issue, but our Natural Resource Division is advocating for a lot of that money to be used, reinvested back into natural resource management. As with anywhere else, we have trash issues, particularly at our lakes. We set up these trash bins at our lakes, and of course we get all the community trash along with the recreational trash. Human encroachment, again, is a real big issue. We have a lot of people moving out into remote areas. Once they start moving out to the remote areas, they need the electricity, they need the water, they need the roads. So that just brings everything in. And yes, we are moving in on our wildlife. We're seeing that in our conflicts that are arising. And we like to have escape routes for some reason. I don't know if there's a lot of criminals that live at those houses, but that's one of my biggest complaints about that. For every house, we have to have at least 5 roads coming to that house. I don't know why. Obviously, vandalism issues. We put in some really nice restroom facilities at our lakes, and we're dealing with that. Recent issue that's been really publicized lately is our raptor poachings. There's a high demand for feathers from raptors for traditional purposes, and unfortunately there's some people out there that have taken advantage of that. They probably don't have any traditional or cultural values, because they're taking these raptors, taking the feathers illegally, and they're selling them for their own personal benefit. We've been publicizing this, and we've been getting a lot of information as a result of that. And so we're trying to build a case, law enforcement case on those incidents. Other poaching activities, obviously big game, wasting game meat is a huge problem. And then climate change. We're still in the process of trying to figure out how to deal with climate change, the drought, the harsh storms that we get. The monsoons are getting more and more harsh. We have a lot of invasive species moving in. Major storms like the one in 2010. That Hogan is, the snow level is at the roof of the Hogan. And you can't even see the track to the, there's a little track right there. Pretty amazing. So that's who we are. We are on the web. If you want to find out about these projects and some of the policies that I mentioned, that's our web address. Our phone numbers are there. And with that, turn it back over to Sarah.
So I think we have time for one or two quick questions.
So in a lot of the country we're seeing a decline in hunting, and I wonder if you're seeing anything Navajo Nation, or if you're seeing the same numbers as well.
I'm actually seeing an increased number. I don't know, as far as the Navajo clients go, the majority of us use the parts, the meat, for food, for ceremonial purposes, and then because the states, they're so hard to draw. It's so hard to draw a permit. A lot of those are funneling over to Navajo. But yeah, I haven't seen a decline at all. It's a good question.
Any other questions?
See that the mule deer population are increasing?
I'm sorry?
Deer population?
Mule deer
The
population?
mule deer population is decreasing.
The mule deer population right now is, I wouldn't go so far as to say it's decreasing, but it's shifting. Over the past several years, we do aerial game surveys on their winter range to try to develop population estimates. And so those areas where we have consistently seen winter range being used, their numbers are decreasing, and we don't know where they're going. And that's what we're in the process of trying to figure out. I have some discussions coming up with our biologists. We're going to be looking at trying to do some radio telemetry. Right now we don't have telemetry on any of our mule deer. And so we're going to be redoing that. And then we're also going to be trying to figure out where they're going. Right? But what that's going to mean is that we're probably going to be decreasing our permit numbers while we're trying to figure this out. So as far as the population levels, we don't know that yet. We're still in the process of trying to figure it out.
All right, well, I think that takes us a little over time. Or go ahead, one more, quick. If you have to leave, you can leave, that's
I
fine.
was wondering if you did anything to manage domestic sheep away from your big report, was that possible?
That is our charge. We have several domestic sheep populations in close proximity to our desert bighorn. And we've done some fencing. We've done a lot of work with the local land users. To this day, knock on wood, we haven't had any interactions. But yeah, that is a major concern that we have, is keeping them separate. Thank you all.
All right. Well, thank you.